Hi, this is Eric from Longbox Review at longboxreview.wordpress.com. Today I have a few trade paperbacks to talk about. I've been slowly working my way through the of trades that I have been buying and then just sticking on the shelves to read at a later time. And I've just been trying to relax and catch up on some reading, I guess. And so what I've done that very thing, and I have here, first of all, a trade from Marvel Comics. This is a collection of the 12, a 12-issue limited series plus a special called Spearhead that's been collected in hardback form here. This is by J. Michael Straczynski and Chris Weston. Let's see. So as you can see on the cover, they've got a bunch of these Golden Age heroes, and I believe these are actual heroes from Marvel's Golden Age. And this is a story about them waking up in modern times after being on ice, so to speak, since the war. Like Captain America, right? So the 12 are Laughing Mask, The Witness, Fiery Mask, Black Widow, although not the one that we're familiar with these days, Captain Wonder, Dynamic Man, Rockman, Blue Blade, Electro, I believe. Yes. Mr. E, which is not the Mr. E that we know from DC Comics. Excello and the Phantom Reporter. I love the Golden Age names. They're so unimaginative, but still they have a charm about them anyway. Let's see here. So the 12-issue series, this came out started I think in 2008. And there were several issues that had come out. I don't remember the exact number. And then there was a hiatus. And then the series finished up later. Again, I'm not sure of the exact date, but I do know that, well, I recall anyway, some months ago, may have been within the last year, I remember seeing in previews that they were collecting the second volume of the 12, and I decided, because I had heard so many good things about it, that I would try it out. But I figured that they would come out with a collection or a complete collection, and indeed Marvel did, and I got that book. So like I said, it's 12 of these Golden Age heroes who because they get trapped by some Nazis. They get gassed and then they get put into these freezing tubes. I believe the plan was that once things cooled down in Europe, the Nazi scientists would then take these heroes and then turn them to their nefarious purposes. But what happened? But they don't get to do that. Things go badly, of course, during the war. And so then these heroes are left in this underground chamber for 60 years until a construction accident uncovers them, and then they return to the States and try to acclimate to the modern day, which, it's Captain America's story all over again, but with these other heretofore, at least for me, unheard of heroes from Marvel's Golden Age. Each issue kind of spotlights every single character, so you get their backstory and a little bit more about them in general. But the overall focus, the lens by which we view all these characters and everything that they go through is the Phantom Reporter, who is actually a reporter who decided to put on a mask and, I guess, do some avenging. It was a simpler time. Anyway, so you have that narrative glue there that is the Phantom Reporter going through the entire series. Along the way, things are happening in the modern day. We get a lot of flashbacks during these spotlights, but in the modern day, people are being killed in mysterious ways, and the hero, well, at least the Phantom Reporter, at first is just trying to figure out what's going on. It makes it look like the Black Widow is perhaps responsible, or maybe it's another of the guys that are doing this. And then there's Electro, which is the robot, and the robot is the invention of a scientist who kind of put his brain, or put his consciousness, so to speak, into the construct, and he was able to control the robot remotely that way. When he was trapped in the underground bunker, the signal got broken, and that the human character behind the robot ended up dying, or so we're led to believe. And so then the robot basically is just this it's just a robot sitting over there in the corner for pretty much all of the series until we get to the end. And I should mention that I probably will be talking about specific things here that if you haven't read the series, I hope I'm not going to spoil too much about it, but I just might. So be forewarned there. As I said, the Phantom Reporter gets news that weird things are going on, and he starts kind of sniffing around, trying to figure out what's going on. In the meantime, like I said, he suspects that something's up with Black Widow, and then Blue Blade, which is he's the guy with no shirt on, and he has a sword, and that's his shtick. Well, he's kind of a attention seeker and opportunist, and so he somehow swings getting a TV deal, and it's not going very well for him, and he ends up dead. I'll get to that in a little bit. Let's see here. In the meantime, let's see. Dynamic Man seems to, out of all the 12, seem to have the best time acclimating to modern times. He's kind of like the more or less the Superman analog. You know, he's somewhat invulnerable. He can fly. He's super strong. Although that also describes Captain Wonder as well, and I guess he's more of the Superman type, or Captain America type, I guess, if you will, if I want to keep it in the Marvel universe. He's more straight-laced, really honest, real upstanding guy. Dynamic Man has a bit of an edge to him, and he makes these comments, and more than once, Phantom Reporter makes a comment about what Dynamic Man says. And so you start to wonder, is Dynamic Man really that good of a hero? Also, the Laughing Mask, which is just a guy in a kind of like a theater mask with guns, and that's pretty much some of these characters. So the Phantom Reporter also has guns. Mr. E also carries guns, and he has a cape and a mask. The Witness also uses guns, and he has a mask, but he supposedly has a power, and that is that he's been granted the ability to know if someone is guilty or innocent, and his task is, if the person is innocent, he's supposed to save them, and if they're guilty, he's supposed to do what he can to make sure that person gets their just reward. So a lot of it's just these guys with guns, but some of these characters do have superpowers. Rockman is supposedly from the underground civilization of Abyssia, and he lost his civilization in some sort of cataclysm, and he lost his daughter and his wife, and he's distraught over that. And he's trying to find his way back home, and so the guy will pound on the ground at night, trying to signal to his people so that they can hear him, and then then able to return to them, I guess. That at least that's the backstory you hear about. Let's see. And then finally, I just want to mention to Excello, Mastermind Excello, who is a guy who he threw a radioactive bullet that activates these mind powers of his, and so he gets glimpses of the future, his future specifically, and he's also a bit of a clairvoyant. Well, like he's a bit of a clairvoyant, but he's also his mind powers. They're a little undefined, but he can sense things, I guess. And well, I'll get to that, man. I was gonna talk about how he's drawn, because he's very distinctive in the way that he's drawn. But a lot of these characters are. And so, like I said, the art is by Chris Weston, with some other people involved, of course. So what was I talking about before? So yeah, Blue Blade ends up dead with a TV show that was crappy to begin with, but he figures out what's going on. So, like I said, Phantom Reporter is trying to run down these leads on these murders, and getting to know the backstories of his fellow heroes along the way. He eventually finds out what happened with Blue Blade, and I'll get to that in a second. Or I can just talk about it now. Let's see. So it turns out that Dynamic Man isn't quite who he appears to be. He actually turns out to be an android that a scientist in the late 30s or early 40s, I don't remember the exact time frame, but created him, kind of like the Human Torch situation. And so while the heroes were in hibernation, the robot Electro kept sending out a signal trying to reconnect to his master, the scientist guy. Well, he did connect to something, and it was Dynamic Man who sensed the signal, and then they had a meeting of the minds, if you will. So basically, Dynamic Man was using Electro to go out and murder certain people, including Blue Blade. Of course, Phantom Reporter puts it together, and with the help of some other people, they stop him. And along the way, Phantom Reporter has a crush on the Black Widow. You find out that her powers are more or less... it's implied that they're demonic based, I guess, or some sort of... It's spiritual in any sense, but it's supposed to come from a dark place, and I guess that's where I get the demonic thing. Like I said, he's harboring a crush, and in the end they kind of get together, although it's implied that she's bisexual in a few scenes. So there's a one in particular scene in the end where a secretary of Excello's is... did I say that right? Yeah, too many names. Excello's secretary makes a comment about how Black Widow hadn't called her the night before, and she says that she will. And so Phantom Reporter makes some comment about that, and about the room being too warm, and so he might be having some fun later. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff crammed in these 13 issues. So like I said, they defeat Dynamic Man in the end, but along the way, Captain Wonder gets hurt, but he's able to overcome that. Phantom Reporter actually inherits the Flaming Mask's flame powers, and you find out the Flaming Mask got his powers because he decided not to save the guy who had the powers before him, because he just wanted those powers. So it wasn't altruistic, and many of these characters end up not being the altruistic superheroes that you kind of would expect coming out of the Golden Age, and that makes sense. nothing is as simple. Even back then, things weren't as simple as perhaps the comics made them appear to be. But given our sensibilities nowadays, we just simply could not accept a story like that where the characters were so earnest and so forthright. At least from the pen of J. Michael Straczynski, right? Anyway, then the book ends with a 13th issue called Spearhead, which is basically just a story set in World War II, and some of the 12 end up teaming up with Captain America and Bucky and Namor and not Namor, Whizzer and I want to say Miss America or Miss Liberty. I can't remember her name. Anyway, they go after Red Skull, and Phantom Reporter ends up actually saving Captain America's life. So there you go. Okay, so I liked it. I liked the story overall. I had some issues with how familiar this story was. Specifically, it reminded me a lot of the DC Elseworlds series, The Golden Age, by Jim Robinson, Paul Smith, and Richard Ory, in that, let's see here. Wow, I can't remember his name now. I want to say Dynaman. Yeah, I think that's it. So Dynaman, who's on the cover of the trade of the Golden Age, he's kind of like sort of the Superman analog here in the story. Well, he turns out to not be exactly what we think he is too. So he's kind of like Dynamic Man in the story of the Golden Age, which came out many years before the 12. There's also murders involved. There's a robot man in the Golden Age who ends up murdering a bunch of people, although he's not being controlled by anybody. He just lost his humanity and teamed up with Dynaman, who actually turns out to be, spoilers, right? Turns out to be Hitler. Hitler's brain is in Dynaman's body. See, I just spoiled one of the best stories ever, but go read it anyway. But there's just just a lot of parallels between the Golden Age and the 12, featuring Golden Age heroes. So I thought that was really strange, and I don't know if anybody has picked up on that or what. I didn't do any research as to the reception of the 12, but anyway, like I said, I enjoyed it. Earlier I mentioned something about the art. Everybody has a distinctive look. Blue Blade's he's kind of got these wild eyes, and he's got the space between his front teeth, which I found kind of charming, especially considering that he wants to be on television and entertain, but he's not all that concerned about how he looks. I mean, he walks around without a shirt on with a cape and a like a swordsman hat. Anyway, Excello, let me see if I can find. Excello has these really arched and angular eyebrows, and he's got this big kind of nose, and he's always sneering and scowling throughout the whole thing, and sometimes his lips get kind of pursed out. He's shown that way a lot, and that just really bugged me that some of the characters, at least, their facial expressions rarely change throughout the entire story. And he's not the only one. The character of the Witness, too, he's kind of got a James Cagney-esque look to him. And his facial expressions don't really seem to change. But other than that, and I guess kind of like some of the faces and especially the eyes, it reminds me of Gary Frank's work. And I'm not a particular fan of how Gary Frank draws faces, especially how he draws eyes. He draws dead eyes, and I just don't like it. But otherwise, it evokes a certain Golden Age sense. Golden Age. I want to say pastiche, but that's not the right word. Anyway, you get a sense of the Golden Age type of feel through the art, while at the same time you're not. You get a certain modern sense added to it. So I commend the artists for that, for balancing or delicately accomplishing that duality of the art. So there you go. Next up is the Unwritten hardcover, Tommy Taylor and the Ship That Sank Twice by Mike Carey, Peter Gross, and a bunch of people here. Kurt Huggins, Al Davidson, Russ Braun, Sean McManus, Dean Ormston, and Gary Erskine doing finishes of Peter Gross's layouts. And then you have Zelda Devon, Al Davison, Chris Chukri, Eva De La Cruz, and Gene McGee on colors, Yuko Shimizu on cover art, and it says special thanks to Xander Cannon and Barb Gutman. So a lot of people worked on this, and I only mention this because while there are certain aspects to the story where the art is different from other bits of the story, and so I guess that makes a lot of sense. Overall, I didn't really notice that big of a difference. I mean, I did notice the difference in the various, like I said, bits of story where there are different art styles and different artists doing it, but because it was the way the story was told, because this is a story about a story, which is about stories, which is the Unwritten anyway. But what we get here is the secret origin of Tommy Taylor. Tommy Taylor, the character in the Unwritten comic, who is the son of the guy who wrote the Tommy Taylor books within the Unwritten world. As the back cover says, 2 stories start here. Anyway, so there are 2 main stories in here, and one is the actual origin of Tommy Taylor, the boy wizard, and then what happens with Tommy Taylor's father as he's trying to create Tommy Taylor. the power, the phenomenon, the son and the wizard in the stories. So it's a multi-layered piece of work, and I mean that in the best sense. I really enjoy this. I wasn't quite sure why we needed to have an actual graphic novel for it. I think it could have been within the story of the Unwritten, although this would have been several issues, at least probably a 12-issue series, I would think. I'm not certain how many pages this is, but this looks probably 6 or 8. They could easily have done this in 6 issues within the main series, but anyway, here it is. I enjoyed it quite a bit. In fact, I think I enjoyed. I was trying to think of, as I was reading this, which story do I enjoy the most? Is it the Tommy Taylor the boy wizard origin, or Tom Taylor and his father's story? And I think I like the latter more than the former. Although the former is very familiar, if you know the Harry Potter stuff, and just fantasy boy wizard type. Not even boy wizard, but just wizard type stuff. The tropes are there, along with vampires and other things thrown in the mix. So there's a lot of stuff, and some of that's on purpose. It wasn't just let's just throw everything and the kitchen sink into it. The whole concept of Tommy Taylor, and in fact, as an example, so Tom's father, whose name I'm forgetting at the moment, he took all these familiar elements and then put them together to create the entity that is Tommy Taylor, the power that Tommy Taylor becomes in the real world. And so you got a little bit of the Superman origin thrown in at the very beginning of the story, where this wizardy type world, the world is doomed and the son will survive. Although I think he ends up not keeping with that in the published story, but so the dad is borrowing heavily from familiar story bits, which only serves to empower the story that Tom Taylor becomes. And in the end, so the whole idea is that the dad is trying to merge the two Tom Taylors, the two Tommy Taylors together, so that in the real world, the magic, the power bleeds into the real world. And that's what happens in the end. Is the revelation that baby Tommy, who is a toddler, I think by the end of this, the winged cat that we've seen throughout the Unwritten series shows up in the real world for the first time. So that was really cool to see. You get to see some familiar characters if you follow the Unwritten, Tommy's friends and how they came to be, and how they came to be friends, and along with them saving the wizardy school, which sounds really familiar, right? So that's Peter. That's Mike Carey and Peter Gross doing what their character is doing, maybe a little bit, or trying, playing with that idea, that whole idea of borrowing. And that's what, honestly, that's what writers do. Speaking as a former writer myself, you take the bits that you like and you work them, you work the magic in your own way, and hopefully come up with something more than the bits themselves. It becomes something more than the bits themselves. And so I'm okay with that. But I really like the idea of this whole series playing with story. What does story mean? When does story become truth, and how much do story lies play into the strength of a story? It's just really fascinating stuff if you like to think about story, which I do. Okay. Next up is a book that I have been hearing has been excellent, but it's by a publisher whose usual catalog is something I tend to avoid. And but the writer of the book is someone whose work I'm really, really starting to dig. So when I saw that there was a trade coming out, I decided I'd pick it up. And that is Uber by Kieran Gillen, illustrated by Kanan White. So this is your alternate history, again, a World War II book. So you have an alternate history where the Germans come up with superhumans. I think they're called battleships in here. Anyway, so they have a few superhumans who are turning the tide of war. So of course the Allies, they want to come up with their own, and you get the whole. There's a character who turns out to be a double agent, and she takes the secret of how the Ubers, the superhumans, were created. Takes that back to the Allies, and they create their own super soldiers, but things don't go exactly well. Let's see here. There are lots of blood, and that's what I was referring to. This is published through Avatar, and that's what I see a lot of in the Avatar books, is just lots and lots of blood. And this is no exception. So Kanan White had a field day with that. I did enjoy it, though. I had a really hard time getting into the book with the first issue. I think this collects numbers 0 through 5, so the first 6 issues of the story. I had a real hard time getting into the first issue and a half or so, because it's not really clear to me who is who, and Mr. Gillen doesn't give us those clues. I mean, the clues are there. I was just reading it quickly, and so I think that's partly the problem. But he doesn't give us any quarter when it comes to the who, like I said, who is who. You pick it up as you're reading it, as I did, but it took me a good 2 issues before I was finally able to figure out who the hell this person was compared to that person. And what their motivations were. And maybe that was intentional, especially when it comes to the double agent character. I believe her name is Stephanie. Yeah, because at first she appears to be, just your typical Nazi sympathizer, scientist assistant. And then she does some things that go against that that stereotype. And then you're still not quite sure where her allegiances lie, and I still have questions about that character. What's interesting about it, though, is that you think, okay, superhumans during World War II, well, then I guess the tide of war would be turned pretty quickly. But it turns out that, yes, they are very powerful. These battleships, as I think they call them in here, but they have their limits. And that is why things don't turn as quickly as you might think, and also gives the story longevity. So I will be checking out, I think, the next volume just to see where we're going with the story, and mostly too because I really like the Stephanie character. I think she has a lot of potential here as the grounding character, as the character through which we journey through the story with. That was a bad sentence. Anyway, it was enjoyable. And then finally, something that was really and extremely enjoyable, and something I've had on my shelf for quite a while, and I just recently read it. I wasn't actually going to talk about it here on this particular episode, but since I just read it, and it was so much fun, I thought I would go ahead and do that. And that is Peter Panzerfaust, or as I like to say, Peter Panzerfaust. That's horrible. Just forget I did that. This is by Curtis Wybe and Tyler Jenkins. And so, along with Alex Salazzo on colors and Ed Brisson on letters, this is an Image comic, Shadowline imprint, and it is basically what happened. What would happen if oh boy, I'm blanking on Peter Pan. That's yes, I did. I actually did read this. What happened? What would happen if Peter Pan was real and involved in World War II? So again, we get World War II. That's 3 books having to do with World War II. That's weird. I didn't plan that. Okay, so Peter shows up to help, and he's American in this. So he as it says here, Peter rallies a handful of plucky French orphans, and they must work together to survive Europe's darkest hour. And of course, those plucky French boys are the Lost Boys in the story. And you get their first adventure together. So they're trying to get to, well, they're trying to escape from a particular town in France because the Germans are coming, and so they decide to go to Paris and work their way there. And along the way, they lose a boy or two. Get to Paris, of course, the Nazis arrive, and so then I believe that is the end of the first volume of basically them deciding that they are going to help the war effort. The story opens up, though, with one of the Lost Boys, now an old man, being interviewed by someone in modern times. And so the story is essentially told in flashback, but you really get engaged in the story as if we're experiencing the story for the first time, or it's being told as if it were the story and not a flashback. So, but the flashbacks the flash forwards to the modern time with the older character never feel intrusive, and it just feels natural as part of the story. And It's really well done. The art is a little stylized, I want to say. The characters are really angular and like I said, stylized. So, it takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's okay. The heads are kind of weirdly shaped, pear-shaped, elongated shaped things. but it's okay. And you also Wendy is in here too, Wendy Darling, along with her brothers. And but Peter is there is a supernatural quality to Peter, because when he's around, the boys seem to be able to do things that they normally probably couldn't do, such as jump the gap between two buildings as a explosive device is coming towards them, and they're going to blow the building up. And Peter jumps across, no problem. The boys are like, okay, we can either stay here and probably die in this explosion, or we can jump across the building, risk our necks. But that's the thing, is that once they've committed to being with Peter, things just seem to work out, and two, they don't really have that much fear involved in what they're doing. So Peter has that, like I said, that supernatural quality about him that affects the boys and how they do things and what they can do. So it's really nice. And just the spirit of camaraderie with all of the boys, it's really glossed over here in this story. Like I said, it's told in flashback, so we're getting the highlights of the beginning of this adventure, as the boys travel throughout France or parts of France. So I'm hoping that in future volumes, because I did pre-order the next, not pre-order, sorry. I did order the next volume in my last comic order. And like I said, I really hope that in future volumes that they expand on that quality, and so things aren't glossed over as much. I really want to get into the characters that we've been introduced to now. Not necessarily Peter Pan. I like the idea of Peter being a kind of an unknown quality. If they define him too much, then that just takes away his magic. Maybe not literally in the story, but figuratively within the confines of the story that we've been given. But I really want to get to know the quote unquote human characters here, and how they feel about things, and get their perspective on Peter Pan and their adventures together. So I'm really looking forward to reading more volumes of this. So that's it. That's all of the trades that I wanted to talk about for now. There's a bunch more that I've read recently that I could talk about, but I think I'm done for this episode. So I hope I didn't spoil too much of this stuff. It's hard to give a synopsis of a book without kind of spoiling things, and I feel like I really did a crappy job on the 12, so I apologize about that. Anyway, what I really hope is that I haven't enticed you to not read these books, because I've enjoyed all of them, some more than others, but they were pretty good, if not really good. So I hope you go read them, decide for yourself. I hope that you enjoy them as much as I did, or even more. Or even if you have read them and didn't like them, or you do read them and you don't like them, I'd really like to know what you think about these particular books. So you can email me at longboxreview@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at longboxreview. I've got a Facebook page. I've got a Tumblr. I've got on the website longboxreview.wordpress.com. There's a link to SpeakPipe where you can click a link and then send me a voicemail. You can, at your computer, you can record a voicemail and it sends it right to me. I also have a voicemail number, 208-953-1841. That's what I want to say. I hope that's right. Anyway, all this information is at the website longboxreview.wordpress.com, and just click the a contact tab or the about tab, and all that stuff is there, so you can get all that information there. Anyway, thank you. Go read some comics. Bye.